So Bill, what we're going to do today is what's called a cognitive lab. This is your first time, so we decided we would do it together. And let me just tell you what the purpose of a cognitive lab is. Sometimes they're called think-alouds because the idea is to get kids to think out loud what they're doing while they complete an assessment. So today we're going to be doing a performance task in the health sciences here at Littleton High School. And what we're going to do is ask some kids to take this test, do this assessment. We're going to interrupt them a few times and ask them what they're thinking, what they're doing, is it clear, those kinds of questions. The whole reason we're doing this is to find out if the assessment you want to give your whole class works well. And we're going to try it with a couple kids. So do you have any questions about why we're doing this?
No, it actually sounds very beneficial. It sounds like you're able to apply some real world topics to it. Very flexible, allows you to work with the group of students you have, so I kind of already like that idea.
Great. So to get started, so that I can help support you, tell me a little bit about the performance task you're going to ask these students to do for us today.
So the performance task that we've chosen, it was discussed at some of our meetings with health science tech instructors from around the state. And we decided that a good one to look at and address first was to demonstrate principles of infection control.
Okay.
They have to do a number of different things with this. They have to be able to classify different microorganisms, chain of infection, mode of transmission, and how to differentiate the spread of those microorganisms, because they all have different ways that they spread. In addition to that, we applied it to a clinical setting where a student would be playing the role of a nurse discharging someone and having to address the fact that they had a knowledge, what we would refer to in healthcare as a knowledge deficit, and that you needed to make an attempt to educate your patient and your family member at the same time. This allowed us to assess not just the fact that they knew about the microorganisms, but knew how to communicate it to their patients in a manner that they would understand and be able to return demonstration on.
Great. So will they be writing some things? It sounds like some part of it is interacting with the patient?
Yep.
Okay, and some of it is writing?
Yes.
Okay.
So this performance task is actually broken into two phases. One of the things when addressing different microorganisms is there are so many that the student is responsible for knowing. So how could you possibly have each of the students know all about these different pathogens that they could encounter and the way to treat them? So what we did was we broke it into two phases. Phase number one is the microorganism information campaign. And that's where they'll have to discuss all of those tasks that I had previously mentioned. Do so using scholarly sources, and then create a public media campaign or brochure that would be geared towards the patient and their family, and to put it together using certain criteria that are within a rubric that has already been established, and then produce that and report to their classmates with a presentation on this subject matter. There are already identified over a dozen different pathogens they could discuss, but we'll be assigning that to a larger group such as our classroom, and give each of them or a group within the classroom one of those pathogens to do this information campaign for. And then phase two would be the simulation scenario itself with the patient.
So which phase are we going to be working with them today on?
Today we'll be looking at phase two,
Okay,
which is
great.
the summary of this evaluation. What they'll be doing is they'll be going over two pathogens at this point in time, and they are already identified as MRSA and pertussis, more commonly known as whooping cough. So we're going to be looking at those two different microorganisms today.
Great. Okay, so a couple things as we get ready to meet with the students, a couple things to do. One of the things I like to do, you sent me the copy of the performance task, the scenario, and one thing I did was I reduced it in size so I would have some room to write notes right in the margin.
Oh, that's great.
That gives me a little extra efficiency. I also put starting and ending times when I do a cognitive lab because I want to know, is this going to take students 2 hours or 45 minutes? So even though you would do the cognitive lab with several different students, some higher performing and some average kids and some lower performing, you want to get a sense when you give it to your class how many class periods it's going to take them to finish it. So I do that. The other thing I usually have is the handy Post-it note. As if I go around, if you have 3 or 4 students, I may want to make notes to myself or about different students as they work. So those are handy ways. There's other ways to document what they're doing. The last thing I'll say is when we meet with the students, we may want to ask them to read directions and then stop and ask, were the directions clear? That will tell us, do we need to edit or revise the way we present the directions? So we may interrupt them a few times, then we might let them get started working and just observe. Okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
Sounds like we're all set.